The hum was no longer a ghost in the machine. It was a rhythm, a pulse I was beginning to chart with frantic, sleepless precision. I had spent the last 2 weeks in a state of suspended reality, half analyst, half sleuth. My workstation at the office was a monument to the lie, a place where I pretended to work on financial models while, in truth, I was using the firm's advanced servers to run my own clandestine queries. My nights were a blur of caffeine and code, an obsessive, data-driven hunt for the source of the noise. The city, once a symphony of ambition, was now a discordant mess, a constant, low-level thrum of psychic dread that followed me everywhere. The only respite I found was at the grocery store, in the presence of Ronan, a quiet, unassuming man who was a living, breathing antidote to a world in pain. My mind, a perfect tool honed by the ascendancy to see patterns, I had found a terrifying new one. I've been cross-referencing my hum data with citywide infrastructure schematics, an act that would have been a career-ending offense had Mr. Finch found out. The result was a chilling, indisputable correlation. The spikes in the hum's frequency weren't random. They weren't a product of the market, or of human emotion, or of any single quantifiable event. They were perfectly aligned with the locations of the Meridian Spires. The spires, the elegant metallic obelisks that the city's architectural pride enjoyed. I had always seen them as works of public art, a beautiful testament to our city's design and technological prowess, but my data told a different story. These monuments weren't just statues, they were conduits. The hum wasn't just a byproduct of the system, it was being actively conducted, amplified, and broadcast through these beautiful, insidious lies. This discovery was both a validation and a terrifying step into the unknown. I wasn't crazy, the hum was real, but the implication was far more sinister than I could have imagined. The Architects of Entropy weren't just passively harvesting humanity's chi through a faulty system. They had built geomantic tools to actively manage it, to feed the psychic dread back into the network, creating a perfect, self-sustaining loop of anxiety and control. Sleep was impossible. The very thought of it felt like a betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the spires, their sleek, metallic forms no longer a symbol of hope, but a towering symbol of deception. I saw the energy of the city, the collective unconscious of millions of people being funneled into these beautiful, silent monsters. The world I had known, the world I had been taught to master, was a carefully constructed lie, and I was the only one who could see the truth. One afternoon, I made a decision that was equal parts scientific curiosity and suicidal desperation. I had to get closer, I had to feel it, I had to go to the source. The nearest Meridian Spire was a 30-minute walk from my office, a gleaming obelisk that rose from a public plaza. It was a public spot, or a popular spot, a place where people ate lunch and children played, all of them unaware of the psychic vampire that stood in their midst. I walked toward it, every step a deliberate, defiant act. The closer I got, the more hum grew in my mind. The more the hum grew in my mind. It was no longer a low-level static. It was a rhythmic, oppressive pulse, a psychic presence that pressed against my skull. It felt like a gentle but constant drain, a phantom touch that was leeching my own energy. I could feel the energy of the people around me, their quiet anxieties and their unfulfilled hopes being siphoned into this silent, humming monument. As I stepped into the plaza, a wave of nausea hit me. The hum was a roar now, a deafening symphony in my mind. I leaned against a cold marble bench, my hands trembling with the sheer, oppressive weight of it all. I felt a dizzying sense of psychic disorientation, a feeling of being a single, perfect note in a symphony of discord. But then, a quiet counterpoint, a single, clear note of peace resonated in my mind. It wasn't a memory of Ronan's touch, the quiet stillness that radiated from him. I held on to it, a mental anchor that kept me from being completely overwhelmed. I closed my eyes and focused on the energy of the spire, not as an analyst, but as a psychic. I pushed my own mind against it, a small act of defiance that was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. I saw it not as a line on a graph, but as a torrent of corrupted energy, a living, breathing thing that was feeding on the collective unconscious of the city. I could feel its cold, mechanical purpose, its relentless, unfeeling hunger. I saw that its elegance, its beautiful, sleek design was not a product of art, but a product of its function. It was a perfect geomantic tool, and I was just beginning to realize the terrifying nature of the hands that had built it. And then something incredible happened. A surge of data feedback, a flicker of corrupted code appeared in my mind's eye. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a random glitch. It was an intentional act, a subliminal line of code that was sent from the spire itself. It was a message. Not a message of words, but a message of intent. The Architects of Entropy had noticed me. They had seen my curiosity, my defiance, and my intrusion. The flicker of corrupted code wasn't a warning. It was a threat. I scrambled to my feet. The adrenaline, a cold jolt in my veins. The nausea was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fear. I was no longer an invisible analyst, a quiet detective in a world of lies. I was a target. My perfect mind, the very thing that made me valuable to the system, was now a problem that needed to be solved. My high score on placement, my elegant code, my ability to see the truth, it all made me a liability to a system that had been built on a lie. I fled the plaza, the hum of the spire a mocking, rhythmic drum beat in my head. I ran back to my apartment, a chaotic blur of fear and determination. The city, once a symbol of the perfect system, was now a labyrinth of deception. The Meridian Spires, once symbols of hope, were now monuments to a lie, and I, Echo, was no longer just a debugger. I was a fugitive. Back in the safety of my apartment, I pulled up my data one last time. I found the file on the statistical ghost, the man the system had tried to erase. And in that file, a new, tiny, almost imperceptible line of corrupted code had been added. It was a message, a data-driven taunt. It told me in no uncertain terms that I was no longer alone in this game. They were watching me, and they were watching him. I had been a quiet detective, but my investigation had just triggered an alarm. My life, my sanity, and my purpose, it was all now on the line. The game had just begun. I was a beautiful, elegant mind, but I was living in a beautiful, elegant lie. I had been taught to master the system, but I was just beginning to realize that the system was a trap. My high score on placement had not been a badge of honor, but a mark of my susceptibility to the lie. And the hum, the very thing that had started my journey, was no longer a mystery to be solved. It was a call to war, and I was just beginning to realize that I was